I woke to sunlight streaming through the villa windows and the sound of Castellano already on a call in the next room. German, rapid fire, something about customs delays in Prague. I lay there listening to the rhythm of his voice, the way authority had become second nature to him, and wondered at how thoroughly my life had transformed from those desperate months of serving water in the cold. My phone buzzed. A message from Marco, my former floor manager at Palazzo Rivalta. Saw your interview in Corriere della Sera. Congratulations on the success. You were always too smart for service work. I stared at the message, feeling the strange dissonance of past and present colliding. I'd been invisible to him then, just another server in cheap polyester, replaceable and unremarkable. Now I was newsworthy, someone he felt compelled to acknowledge. I didn't respond. Some bridges were meant to burn completely. Castellano appeared in the doorway, still holding his phone. Prague office is having issues with a shipment. Nothing catastrophic, but I need to fly out this afternoon. Come with me. I have the board meeting for the Literacy Foundation at 3. He smiled, the private one that was just for me, not the strategic mask he wore for business. Look at you, having obligations that compete with mine. I'm oddly proud. You're the one who insisted I build independent credibility. Best decision I ever made after hearing you in the first place. He crossed to the bed, kissed me with the casual intimacy of married people who'd earned their comfort. The foundation work suits you. Nana would approve. The mention of her name still hurt, even 2 years later. She'd say I was being self-indulgent, working with nonprofits when there's profit to be made. She'd say you were remembering where you came from while building where you're going. There's a difference. He checked his watch. I'll be back tomorrow evening. Luca will stay with you, and the security protocols are embedded in my daily routine. I know. I helped design them, remember. I remember. I'm just overprotective because old habits die hard. Because the world that made me dangerous is still full of people who'd use you to hurt me, and I'm too selfish to risk that. He said it lightly, but I heard the truth underneath, the fear that success hadn't eliminated, just transformed into different anxieties. I pulled him back down to the bed. Then hear this, I'm not the waitress you hired 3 years ago. I can handle myself now. You made sure of that. I gave you tools. You made yourself formidable. Then trust what you helped create. He left an hour later, and I watched his car disappear down the mountain road with the same mixture of independence and connection that defined our marriage. We'd learned to be separate without being distant, to support without smothering, to build individual strengths that made our partnership more resilient. The foundation meeting went well. We'd secured funding for 3 new literacy centers in underserved neighborhoods, the kind of places where kids like I'd been could find escape in books when reality was harsh. Signora Bianchi, who chaired the board, pulled me aside afterward. You're transforming this organization, she said. The donors respond to you because you understand the communities we serve from lived experience, not academic theory. I got lucky. Most people with my background don't get the opportunities I received. That's why this matters. You're creating paths for others that didn't exist for you. That's not luck, that's responsibility well used. She hesitated. I'm retiring from the chair next year. The board wants to know if you'd consider taking the position. The offer was significant, real power, independent of Castellano, the kind of role that would cement my reputation as someone with influence beyond being his wife. I'm honored. Can I think about it? Of course, but Alina, you've earned this. Don't let imposter syndrome make you doubt that. I drove back to Milan through autumn-painted hills, thinking about chairmanships and foundations and the strange trajectory from invisible to influential. My phone rang. Castellano, video call from the plane. How did the meeting go? They want me to chair the foundation. His face lit up with genuine pleasure. That's extraordinary. Are you going to accept? I think so. But it's a 3-year commitment, which means less time for the Eastern European expansion. Then we hire someone to handle day-to-day operations there, and you focus on what matters more to you. We're successful enough now that you get to choose based on impact, not obligation. The words should have felt liberating. Instead, they triggered something I'd been pushing down for months. Do you ever resent that I'm building things separate from you? What? No, why would I? Because I was your project initially, your investment, your creation, and now I'm making choices that don't serve your interests. Silence on the line, then pull over. This conversation deserves your full attention. I found a scenic overlook and stopped the car, phone propped on the dashboard. Castellano's face filled the screen, serious and intent. Listen carefully, he said. You were never my project. You were my gamble that someone with your intelligence and resilience would become extraordinary if given resources and opportunity. And I was right. But what you've become isn't my creation, it's your achievement. The fact that you're making choices independent of my interests proves the investment worked. That doesn't create resentment, it creates pride. Even if those choices take me away from your world. My world is legitimate business and nonprofit work and occasional navigation of complicated social dynamics. That's exactly where you're operating. You haven't left my world, you've expanded it. He leaned closer to the camera. Elena, I love you not despite your independence, but because of it. The woman who negotiates with me as an equal, who builds her own influence, who occasionally tells me I'm wrong, that's who I married. Don't become someone else to protect my ego. I felt tears threaten and blinked them back. I sometimes worry I'm not grateful enough, that I've forgotten you saved Nana, gave me everything. Stop. Gratitude is what you felt when you signed the contract. What you should feel now is partnership. We've saved each other in different ways. I gave you opportunity. You gave me purpose beyond profit. We're even and we're stronger together than apart. Never mistake that for debt. A car passed behind me, expensive and fast, and something about it triggered old instincts. I checked the mirrors, nothing concerning, but the awareness never fully left. Castellano noticed. What is it? Nothing, probably, just a car that felt wrong. License plate. I rattled it off from memory. The languages I'd learned for him had trained my mind to catalog details automatically. He typed something on his end, nodded. Registered to a corporate entity, but nothing that raises flags. Still, vary your route home. And Alina. Yes. Those instincts are why you're good at this. Don't apologize for vigilance. The call ended, but his words stayed with me as I took the longer route back to the city, through neighborhoods that had changed in the 3 years since I'd moved through them in poverty. The literacy centers we'd funded were visible from the highway, bright buildings with children's artwork in the windows, small revolutions happening one reader at a time. At the apartment, Luca was already positioned in the lobby, but something in his posture was different, tenser, more alert. I approached carefully. Problem? Possibly. Someone tried to access the building's service entrance an hour ago. Wrong credentials, left before security could respond. Could be nothing. But you don't think it's nothing. I think Mr. Castellano has been very successful at going legitimate, which means the people who preferred his father's methods are getting nervous about being left behind. He handed me a tablet showing security footage. A man in maintenance coveralls, face obscured, moving with purpose that suggested training. Does Dante know? He's landing in Prague now. I'll brief him once he's secured, but I wanted you aware first. Extra security is already deployed, 2 on the perimeter, 1 in the garage, and I'm not leaving the lobby until Mr. Castellano returns tomorrow. I studied the footage, that old feeling returning, the awareness that safety was temporary, that success made you visible to people who saw opportunity in your vulnerabilities. Thank you for telling me directly instead of filtering through him. You're not cargo to protect. You're a principal who deserves intel. Mr. Castellano was very clear about that distinction. Upstairs, I activated the apartment's enhanced security protocols, reinforced locks, panic button on my phone active, cameras streaming to Luca's monitor. Then I changed into comfortable clothes and tried to work on Foundation correspondence. But my mind kept returning to the footage, to the car that had felt wrong, to the growing sense that we'd become successful enough to attract attention we'd prefer to avoid. My phone rang, unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Elena Castellano, a woman's voice, educated, American-accented English. Speaking. My name is Victoria Chen. I'm a journalist with the Financial Times, working on a feature about legitimate business transformation in European family enterprises. I'd love to interview you about your role in your husband's organizational evolution. I pulled up my laptop, searched her name, legitimate byline, respectable articles, nothing obviously problematic, but the timing felt suspicious. How did you get this number? Your foundation listed you as a contact for media inquiries. True, we done that to facilitate coverage of our work. What specifically are you interested in? The narrative arc is fascinating. Dante Castellano transitioning from his father's gray market operations to completely transparent business practices, with you as the catalyst and public face. It's a redemption story that resonates with broader shifts in European business culture. I'm not sure redemption is the right frame. It's evolution, not penance. Even better, that's exactly the kind of nuance I want to explore. Could we meet? I'm in Milan this week. Every instinct said no, but refusing might create more curiosity than cooperating. I need to check my schedule and consult with my husband. Can I call you back? Of course. She gave me her direct line. For what it's worth, I'm genuinely interested in telling this story accurately. Too many articles about business transformation focus on the men who lead it and ignore the women who make it possible. The line went dead. I immediately called Castellano. Financial Times wants an interview, I said without preamble. Woman named Victoria Chen. Timing feels suspicious given the security anomaly. Hold. I heard him typing, making calls in rapid German. 5 minutes later. Chen is legitimate, award-winning business journalist, known for thorough research and fair coverage. But she's also known for finding stories that sources prefer stay buried. If she's digging into our transformation, she might uncover things from the transition period that looked legitimate on paper but wouldn't survive deep scrutiny. So I decline. No, you cooperate fully with the understanding that transparency now protects us better than secrecy. The restructuring is complete. Everything we currently operate is clean. If she finds gray areas from the transition, we can frame them as the messy reality of transformation rather than ongoing malfeasance. He paused. But Alina, be careful. She'll ask about us, about how we met, about Nana's medical care and how it was financed. Those are personal areas where truth and strategy intersect uncomfortably. So I tell partial truth. You tell the truth from your perspective. Waitress hired for language skills. Relationship that developed professionally then personally. Transformation that benefited both of us. That's accurate without being incriminating. And if she asks about threats, about security incidents, you acknowledge that success in international business comes with security considerations, but you don't detail specifics. Frame it as standard practice for people at our level. We talked for another 20 minutes, wargaming questions and responses, until I felt prepared. Then Castellano's voice softened. How are you really? With the security concerns and the interview and me being gone. I'm managing. But I miss the days when we were building things together instead of defending what we've built separately. Then let's fix that. When I'm back, we take a week. Just us, no business, no foundation work, no obligations. Somewhere remote where we can remember why we chose this partnership. That sounds perfect. After we hung up, I sat in the darkening apartment, watching Milan's lights bloom against twilight, and thought about transformation and cost. We'd achieved everything we'd planned: legitimacy, success, influence, security. But somewhere in the achievement, we'd become people who needed panic buttons and security protocols and careful answers to journalists asking reasonable questions. Nana's voice in memory. The trick is remembering who you are while becoming who you need to be. I called Victoria Chen back and agreed to the interview. 2 days later, we met at a cafe in Brera, public, elegant, the kind of place where our conversation would be visible but not overheard. She was younger than I'd imagined, maybe 40, with the sharp eyes of someone who'd learned to see past surfaces. "Thank you for making time," she said, setting up a recorder after I nodded consent. "I promise to be respectful of your privacy while telling an important story." What makes this story important? Because business transformation is usually framed as male achievement, the prodigal son returning, the heir who rejects his father's methods. But my research suggests that in the Castellano case, you were the catalyst. Your presence, your credibility, your independent reputation created space for Dante to restructure without looking weak to the traditionalists. It was accurate enough to be flattering and perceptive enough to be dangerous. I think that overstates my role. Dante was already moving toward legitimacy. I was fortunate to be hired during that transition. But your hearing wasn't random, was it? He specifically sought someone with your language skills, your educational background, your, forgive the bluntness, your narrative of overcoming poverty through competence. That's not luck, that's strategic casting. I sipped my coffee, buying time. Are you asking if I was aware I was being positioned as a symbol? I'm asking if you consented to it. The question cut to the heart of everything. Initially, I was desperate and grateful. My grandmother was dying and Dante offered resources I couldn't access anywhere else. So yes, I agreed to be whatever he needed me to be. But over time, that performance became real. I genuinely built skills, created relationships, earned credibility that exists independent of him. So if it started as strategic casting, it evolved into genuine partnership. Victoria nodded, making notes. That evolution, was it always comfortable? No, there were moments when I resented being someone's project, someone's investment, when I wondered if anything about me was truly mine, or if it had all been engineered by someone who'd identified my potential and exploited it. And now I understand that potential is worthless without opportunity, and opportunity is exploitation unless it's offered with genuine respect for your autonomy. Dante gave me both. That's rare enough to be worth the complicated feelings. We talked for 2 hours about the literacy foundation, the business expansion, the social navigation, and eventually, inevitably, about security. "You have significant protection," Victoria observed, "more than most business executives at your level. Why?" "Because my husband operates in international markets where success creates enemies. And because I'm visible enough to be a potential target for people who'd prefer his father's methods remain dominant." "Has anyone actually threatened you?" I thought about Andretti, about the photo of Nana's facility, about the maintenance worker with wrong credentials. There have been incidents that warranted increased caution. Nothing I'd characterize as direct threats, but enough to justify prudence. That must be frightening. It's the reality of the world we occupy. I've made peace with it. Have you? Because your foundation work focuses on creating opportunities for young women from disadvantaged backgrounds, the same demographic you came from. That suggests someone who hasn't forgotten what vulnerability feels like. The observation was too accurate to deflect. I haven't forgotten. I use that memory to ensure others don't have to exchange their autonomy for survival the way I initially did. That's not trauma, that's responsibility. Victoria smiled and I saw respect in it. That's a good answer, better than most people I interview could articulate. The article ran 3 weeks later. fair, thorough, framing our transformation as case study in successful business evolution, with appropriate attention to complexity. It mentioned security concerns without sensationalizing them, acknowledged my role without diminishing Dante's, and portrayed our partnership as genuinely collaborative rather than exploitative. But it also put us on a bigger stage. Within days, I was fielding interview requests from Bloomberg, The Economist, Italian Vogue. Dante was invited to speak at business schools about ethical transformation, and with the visibility came renewed attention from people we'd hoped had moved on. The message arrived via encrypted email to my foundation account. Your transformation story is inspiring. Too bad it's built on your husband's father murdering my uncle in Warsaw, 1986. Some debts don't expire just because you've learned to dress nicely. JK. I stared at the screen, ice flooding my veins. Then I forwarded it to Dante and called him immediately. I'm seeing it now, he said, voice tight. This is what I was afraid of. The visibility attracts historians. Is it true? Did your father kill someone in Warsaw? I don't know. He never detailed his operations, and by the time I took over, he was already dying and uninterested in confession. But it's possible. That world was violent in ways we've tried to leave behind. So what do? We investigate who JK is, what they want, and whether this is genuine grievance or opportunistic extortion. And Alina, I'm sorry. This is exactly the kind of past that legitimacy can't fully erase. The investigation took a week, Luca working with contacts in Poland, Dante leveraging relationships with people who remembered the 1980s. The conclusion was unsettling. JK was Jerk Kowalski, whose uncle had been a mid-level player in Warsaw's gray markets who disappeared in 1986 under circumstances that remained suspicious. Dante's father had been in Warsaw at that time. The connection was plausible if unprovable. What does he want? I asked at dinner in the lake house, our supposed week of peace transformed into crisis management. That's what concerns me. He hasn't made demands yet. Just the accusation, which means he's either building to something larger or trying to destabilize us emotionally before the ask. Or telling the truth and wanting acknowledgement. Dante looked at me sharply. You believe him? I believe it's possible. Your father operated in violent times using violent methods. That you've transformed doesn't erase what he built on. I reached across the table for his hand. If it's true, we owe that family something. Even if we can't fix the past, we can acknowledge it. Acknowledgement is ammunition, Alina. It's admitting culpability that could be used legally, socially, strategically. Or it's the right thing to do, regardless of cost. We didn't resolve it that night, but 3 days later, Jerk Kowalski sent a second message. I don't want money, I want a conversation. My family deserves to know what happened. You owe us that much. Dante agreed to meet him. Neutral territory, public place, me present because Jerk had specifically mentioned my transformation story in his first message. We chose a cafe in Warsaw, with Luca and 2 other security personnel positioned discreetly nearby. Jerk was 60, gray-haired, with eyes that had seen decades of wondering. He brought a woman, his sister, Marta, who had her uncle's photo clutched in her hands like evidence. Thank you for coming, Jerk said in Polish, which I translated for Dante. I know this is difficult. Tell us what you know, Dante said quietly. Jerk spoke for 20 minutes, about an uncle who'd worked in logistics, who'd partnered with a mysterious Italian, who disappeared after a deal went wrong. About a family that had spent 38 years wondering if he'd fled or been killed, if they should mourn or wait. About archives that finally opened after communism fell, revealing whispers that the Italian had been involved in the disappearance. I don't have proof, Jerk concluded. Just fragments and suspicions, but your father's name appears in enough connected documents that I believe he knows what happened. And since he's dead, you're the only one who can help us find closure. Dante was silent for a long moment. Then, my father didn't leave confessions, but I have his private papers, ledgers, correspondence, documents I've never fully processed because they detailed operations I didn't want to know about. I'll review them. If I find anything about your uncle, I'll share it. That's not a promise of answers, but it's a promise of effort. Tears tracked down Marta's face. That's all we wanted, just to know someone cared enough to look. We spent 3 more hours with them, sharing coffee and stories about transformation and the weight of inherited history. When we finally left, I felt exhausted and somehow lighter, as though honesty, even painful honesty, weighed less than strategic silence. On the flight back to Milan, Dante held my hand in the dark cabin. Thank you for pushing me to meet them. Thank you for being brave enough to acknowledge what your father might have done. If I find evidence he killed that man, it will complicate everything we've built. The legitimacy narrative becomes harder to sustain. Or it becomes more genuine. We're not pretending the past was clean. We're actively working to repair what we can and acknowledge what we can't fix. That's more honest than most business transformation stories. He pulled me close, and I rested my head on his shoulder, watching clouds pass beneath us like the layers of history we were slowly excavating. 3 weeks later, Dante found it, a coded entry in his father's 1986 ledger that referenced Warsaw logistics problem resolved permanently. Not confession, exactly, but enough to suggest that Jerk's uncle had indeed been killed, probably as punishment for betraying a deal to competitors. Dante arranged a private meeting with Jerk and Marta, gave them the ledger page, and offered to fund a memorial in their uncle's name. It wasn't justice, but it was acknowledgement, and they accepted it with tears and gratitude that felt like absolution neither of us deserved. The experience changed something between us. We became more honest about the foundations our success was built on, more willing to acknowledge that legitimacy wasn't purity, just better choices made consistently. And we both committed to using our resources to repair what we could. The Literacy Foundation expanding to include victim support services, Dante's business actively funding organization that helped survivors of the violence his father's generation had normalized. It wasn't redemption, exactly. More like responsibility, the adult understanding that you could inherit debts you didn't create and still be obligated to address them. 5 years after I'd first walked into Palazzo Rivalta in the cold, I stood on the stage at our foundation's annual gala, watching Milan's elite applaud the literacy centers that had taught 3,000 children to read, the job training programs that had placed 800 women in careers with dignity, the memorial funds that acknowledged past violence while funding future peace. Dante stood beside me, his hand at the small of my back, not possessive anymore, just present. We'd learned to be partners who supported without smothering, who challenged without undermining, who acknowledged complicated history while building better futures. After the gala, we drove to the lake house and stood on the terrace where we'd first negotiated our real relationship. The mountains held stars, and the water reflected them like promises renewed. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked. "That cold night when you noticed a waitress speaking Polish?" "I regret that my world required you to trade some autonomy for safety. I regret that my father's history became your burden. I regret every moment of fear I've caused you." He turned to face me. "But I don't regret you, not for a second. Even when I push you toward uncomfortable honesty. Especially then. You make me better than I'd choose to be alone, and that's the best kind of partnership." I kissed him, tasting the truth of transformation. That we'd both become different people through collision and choice. That the performance had become real somewhere along the way. That the girl who'd served water and the man who'd built empires had found something between them that was stronger than strategy and more enduring than obligation. We were still complicated, still occasionally fighting about security and independence and how much honesty was sustainable. Still navigating a world where success attracted attention and attention required constant vigilance. But we were also genuinely in love, not the desperate gratitude of that first contract, but the earned affection of people who'd seen each other's worst qualities and chosen to stay anyway. Not because we had to, but because we wanted to. Because alone we were formidable, but together we were something better. The lake held stars, the mountains held us, and tomorrow would bring new challenges, journalists with questions, historians with grievances, competitors looking for weaknesses. But tonight we had this partnership that had survived transformation, love that had grown from transaction, and the understanding that home wasn't where you started but who you chose to build with. Somewhere in the distance I imagined Nana's voice. "You did well, little one. You stayed dangerous but remembered to stay human. That's the whole trick." I smiled against Dante's shoulder, and for the first time in 5 years, I felt completely warm.